I'm Cammie Mansfield, Interpretive Resources Project Coordinator for Gwinnett County Department of Community Services, and I'm here today with Mary Ann Wood. Today is Monday, May 20th, 2024, and we're at Sugar Hill City Hall, located in Sugar Hill, Georgia. Well, and since we are continuing from the previous interview, I'm just going to ask you a few questions about some of your memories. I want to start off with talking about your mother and her graduation.
Okay. Mother was born in 21. She lived 4 days shy of her 92nd birthday. She graduated from Sugar Hill High School in 1939. She was the first graduating class that received class rings, which I have donated to the museum. But she graduated in the 11th grade. They didn't have the 12th grade back then. I gave them the diploma, the class ring, and a picture of her in her graduation dress, which is a white negligee-looking dress, very pretty, very, very appropriate. But it's in the museum. And she was, 18? Would that have been 18? Something like that, yeah.
Did she ever tell you any memories of ordering the class ring?
No, but one thing she did tell me, she was either voted the valedictorian or the salutatorian, and I can't remember which. But there was a set of twins. One was ahead of her, I guess, which would be the valedictorian, I think. The other twin came in third, and they offered her a gold piece to let the twin sister take her place, and she took it. And so she didn't know what happened to the gold piece, but she did let the twin sisters. Now, how many people would do that, but that was Mother. And I can't remember their names. I want to say Ruby and Ruth Johnson, but I could be wrong. But they were twins. I remember that.
Do you know how many people your mother graduated with?
No, I don't. In my mind, I'm thinking 11, but I could be wrong. Wasn't many at all.
Well, do you have any other stories about your parents that we haven't covered, or?
Well, we talked about, they're both Baileys, but two separate Baileys. And it was funny because we talked about that, but I was thinking this morning how confusing it is to people, because down Highway 20, starting at the racetrack, going all the way almost to the river, Baileys were on both sides of the road. It'd be like my daddy's brother, my mother's brother, and it was just we're just like this, all up and down Cumming Highway. So I was a Bailey on that side and a Bailey on this side. So I've got uncles and first cousins all up and down Highway 20. So that's pretty odd.
Well, and that, speaking of Highway 20, that reminds me of a story that you had started to tell us about your Mustang. Tell us more.
Okay. I got a 1967 Mustang for graduation, red. It was one with the horses on the seats, it was a uptown Mustang. And Sudduth Body Shop was down. We talked about the businesses, and Sudduth Body Shop was on Highway 20, which was one of the businesses in Sugar Hill. And I remember I put 3 front ends on that Mustang, and every time I'd go by, Dieter Sudduth, who was the owner, he said, "What'd you do this time?" So one time I was looking for 50 cents in my pocketbook to get gas to get home from Chamblee, because I was at work and I didn't have enough gas. And I was looking for 50 cents in my pocketbook to buy gas, and I hit the car in front of me, who thought was stopped at the red light, but I guess I took off and he didn't. So that was one of the front ends. But, it was all fixable, but it was 3 front ends. And, I never remember getting fussed at about it, which was unusual to think. I think if I had my children and they did that 3 times, I would be a little bit upset. But I don't remember my daddy and mother getting upset about it. And I'm sure they did, but I don't remember that.
How long did you keep that car for?
I still have, that was in 67, and I still had that car in about 81 or 2.
So it served you well.
Well, when I came home from work that day, my husband had traded it in for a Malibu, a used Malibu. And I cried and cried and cried, but it was too late. Too late. It was gone.
Well, we started talking about the businesses in Sugar Hill. Tell us some of the businesses you remember being in Sugar
Well,
Hill.
I jotted a few down, and I was telling you about Sudeth Body Shop. And across the street from that was a little garage, and it was Herman Webb was the guy's name, and he worked on cars. Now, everybody knew Herman Webb, but as far as being advertised as a business in Sugar Hill, I don't know that you would say that, but we knew that he had a garage, an automotive shop, I guess you'd say now, there, and then Sudeth Body Shop across from that. Then up the road from that on Highway 20 was my uncle's. My granddaddy started the cabinet shop, but then my uncle took it over. That was Bailey's Cabinet Company. And then as you go up around Broad Street and then around to Sugar Hill and turn right on Roosevelt Circle was Hill's Cabinet Shop. And that was Wayne Hill that ran that. And his mother had a beauty shop next door, Frances Hill's Beauty Shop, in her house. I guess it was in her house. I'm sure it was. Then there was another beauty shop in Sugar Hill, and that was Bill Spence. And we say beauty shop because now they say hair salons, but these were beauty shops. And when you went to the beauty shop, you planned on staying all day. It didn't matter if they were 3 hours behind because you saw everybody and talked to everybody, and you knew what was going on all over town when you got home. But Bill Spence, you could call and say, "Can you do me Friday afternoon?" She said, "Yeah, I'll work you in somehow." So you'd just go. And, you know, you'd get worked in. It might be 8 o'clock that night, but she'd get you done. And I remember one time I was in high school, and I decided I'd have my hair frosted. Now, I'm a brunette, originally. And I was in, I guess, well, I was still in high school, I think. Might have been, I know I was still in high school. And I said, "I want my hair frosted." And so she let one of the customers pull my hair through one of those plastic, y'all probably don't know what I'm talking about, but they had like a rubber cap, and it would go down over your head, and they would take a sewing needle and go in and pull, it had holes in it, and they'd pull hair through that cap. And she said, "Do you want it highly frosted or light?" I said, "No, let's do it high." So this lady, who's dead now, so she's deceased now, but she'd never done this before. She just went in and just pulled hair. And I got home, and my daddy said, "You can just get back in the car and go right back over there, and you get your hair colored back the way it's supposed to be, because you're not going nowhere looking like that." And I did. I had to go get it. Not that day, but the next day I had to go get it dyed back to its natural color. But that was what we called highlighting today. It was called frosting back then. And that was at Bill Spence's beauty shop. I do remember that. But, you know, it was just fun. You went over there and just talked to everybody and spent the day at the beauty shop.
And what sort of things it was more than just getting haircut or...
Well, I remember Daddy would always pick up Mother, and he would say, "What's wrong? They couldn't get to you today?" And, you know, that's big joke, ha, ha, ha. But, you know, she just did all the older women, you know, the cuts and they all looked the same. Every woman that come out there, their hair was fixed the same. Might have been a gray hair and a brown hair, but they all were styled the same way. But that was that was when they had lacquer. You don't know what lacquer is. Lacquer came in a little, you've seen the old-timey perfume bottles with the little thing, little spongy thing that you press. Well, lacquer, it's just what it says. Lacquer that you put on furniture to preserve it. Lacquer was in these bottles. And if you wanted your hair to stay all week till you came back the next week, she said, "Do you want lacquer?" "Yeah, put lacquer on there." And she'd take that spray bottle. Well, honey, you could move your whole hair. It's like a helmet. It didn't go nowhere because you had lacquer. So that was one thing that they don't have anymore.
How did you get the lacquer out?
Well, it washed out the next week. But you could go a whole week and your hair still looked like it did. Yeah, and I can remember Mother wrapping hers in toilet tissue and putting a hairnet on. She would wrap it in toilet tissue at night and put a hairnet on top of it. Then the next morning she'd unwrap it, and it looked just like it did when she went to bed. But it was the lacquer. It kept it from moving, you know.
And when you say wrap, not to curl it, just wrap
No.
it to prevent it from sticking
from messing up.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
even though it wasn't going anywhere, we still wrapped it.
Wow.
Yeah, but the lacquer was, all the old women had lacquer on their hair, and I can just see her now squirting it to just like, Now that was after hairspray. You know, it'd still have hairspray, but the lacquer would go on top of the hairspray, so it wouldn't go anywhere. But that was one of the things at the beauty shop. And then Mayor Bias, I'm sure that you have had someone speak of Mayor. He was Gwinnett County Commissioner. He and Glad Sudduth had a furniture store right across from Racetrack in that abandoned brick building that's still there. And I remember one thing about it. It had I think it was a quarter, wasn't a silver dollar, it would have been a quarter, glued to the floor. And everybody would go in and try to pick it up. I mean, he thought that was really funny, you know. But it was still there, I guess, when they may still be there now, I don't know. And then his sister, Minnie Staten, had a drapery shop in the basement. And she did draperies for everybody far and near. She was very good at that. And then his niece had a dance place where she taught dancing lessons, Sarita Sudduth, and she taught dancing in the basement of that place too. So it was a, I think there was an insurance company on one end, and that was Pete Wallace. Now Pete Wallace was a member of the Sugar Hill community. He used to be in Sugar Hill, but he moved from there to that strip mall, and that was back. I guess that was in the 70s. Sometime in the 70s. And next door to that was a lady, Ms. Lancaster. She baked cakes for people, and our favorite was the coconut cake. And she also baked fried pies. And I can't remember what other kind of cakes, but I do remember coconut was the one that my mother always wanted to get. And we always got some fried pies. But she was a good baker. And I think you're interviewing Ferris Ower. And Ferris was the wedding cake lady in the community. And oh my gosh, she did my daughter's cake for her wedding. She's been married 25 years. Ferris did a cake, and that was the biggest cake I have ever seen. They were married at the Marietta Country Club in Marietta. So she had to have a pretty cake. And I picked out, I want to say it was $900. And it seemed like that was a lot. Maybe it wasn't that much, but it was very, very expensive. But it was like tiers and tiers and tiers. And then out from the cake, they had to move a special table in to put it on, was other cakes. And it had like 5 different 2 or 3 tier cakes coming out from that big cake. And so John Barfield did the pictures at her wedding. And he did all the pictures in Gwinnett County, all the seniors, and, real good photographer. He did her wedding, and they were on the golf course. After they'd been in Marietta Town Square, they took them to the golf course and made pictures. And by the time he got through with the pictures, people were leaving before we even cut the cake. And I was trying to get people to take a cake from the cake home with them because we had so much cake. But I was telling Ferris earlier this morning, the topper of their cake was so beautiful. Not only was the cake gorgeous, the topper was so beautiful. And they've sold about 4 houses. They've moved a lot in the 25 years. The girls are in college now. And every time they would move, the topper of cake stayed in the china cabinet. And it would be delivered to the new residence by the person sitting in the passenger seat of the car. Nobody wrapped that cake. Nobody touched that cake topper except the person sitting in the car. And you had to hold it with both hands so nothing would touch that cake topper till you got to the new residence. Then it'd go back in the china cabinet. But she did beautiful cakes. She was she could make any kind of cake, but she was noted for her wedding cakes.
Mm-hmm. What was the flavor of your daughter's wedding
I think it
cake?
was just your vanilla. It was not a funky flavor or anything. It was just her original vanilla. But it was beautiful, beautiful.
The cake topper, what does it look like?
Well, I can't remember really. It was tall. It was like this tall, and it was an archway, and it had the bride and groom, and then it had orchids on the base of it that she had handmade. And that's the reason you don't move it around, because those orchids are made out of icing. They probably got lacquer on them, I guess. I don't know. But it had orchids all the way around, so that it was all one piece. So when you pick it up, you don't just get the bride and the groom. You get the orchids and all the... It was gorgeous, gorgeous. Yeah.
Are there any other businesses you remember?
Oh, I've tried to think of more, but we talked about the ice plant. I think you were going to ask me about that. Now, Kelly B. Willard lived in Sugar Hill, right there on Stanley Street. As you turn on Stanley Street, his family lived first house on the left. My grandparents lived first house on the right. And but Kelly B ran the ice plant in Buford, along with the wrecker service. And when we would go on vacation, we'd always go by, and Daddy would tell Kelly B, he'd say, I ain't got any money, but I sure do need a scoop of ice to go in our cooler so we can drive to Gatlinburg and Cherokee. And he'd say, go get him a scoop of ice and put him in. I mean, they were real good friends. You know, that was a big joke between them. But he was a good guy. He had lost a son at real early. They lost a son. But then they had two more sons. And Jerry was a senior in high school, or either he had just graduated. He was the oldest, and he was killed in a car accident. And then Jimmy was the youngest son, and he took over the ice plant and the wrecker service, and he still owns it at this time today. And it's right there as you cross the railroad track off of Shadburn Avenue. It's on the left as you cross the track going into the city of Buford. And I don't know if Jimmy lives in I don't think he lives in Sugar Hill now, but he did for a long time. And his kids went to Sugar Hill School. I knew the kids as they were growing up.
Your aunt had a fabric store.
And I had forgotten about that. Sugar Hill Drive-In. We talked about the Sugar Hill Drive-In and how we would, get food there on Friday night, and that would be our dinner for Friday night. Or we were dating, we'd go by and get a milkshake and a hamburger. But she had a fabric shop it's a little house right next door, and she rented it and sold fabric. And I remember Mother made all my clothes because, we didn't have a lot of money. Not anybody did back then. And I remember 2 pieces of fabric, and I can see both of them right now. She made me 2 wool skirts, and one was a red plaid and one was a blue plaid. And you don't know what I'm talking about because you probably don't even know what a pleat is. Do you know what a pleat? You do know what a pleat is. Okay. Well, they were knife-size pleats, and they went all the way around the waistband. And perfect. My mother could, and Mother never had a sewing lesson in her life. But she could look at a Sears and Roebuck catalog and pick out a dress and make me one just like it. No pattern or anything. But she made my skirts for me to wear to school, and she got that fabric, from my aunt. Her name was Livonia Bailey. And her husband's the one that had the bowling alley in Sugar Hill, and he did floors, sanded floors. He had a floor company.
How long did your aunt have that fabric store?
I don't remember. I'd say a couple of years, maybe.
Okay. Do you know where she got her fabrics from?
I do not. I have no idea.
And you mentioned your family had a cabinet shop, and the Hill family had a cabinet shop. Do you know why there were so many cabinet shops?
Well, they didn't do just cabinets for people around Buford.
Right.
They did cabinets elsewhere too. And there was another guy that lived in Sugar Hill, and he had a cabinet shop, but I think his was in Buford. Harry Blankenship also had a cabinet shop, but I believe his was in Buford, not in Sugar Hill, but he was from Sugar Hill because his sister was a cheerleader with me at North Gwinnett. So I know they lived in Sugar Hill area.
You mentioned being a cheerleader. Tell us, what would you have been a cheerleader for? What sport?
Basketball and football. Because if you were one, you were the other one. And I was a cheerleader in 1966 and 67.
And how many cheerleaders?
I think there were seven or 8 of us. Not like 25 like, they have now. And the skirts, that we were laughing about that earlier, they had to be no more than 3 inches above the knee. And if they were, Mr. Bagwell, our principal, said, you'll have to have it redone. And sure enough, we had one girl. Hers was a little bit shorter, and he made them redo it. And it was probably real expensive because there again, we're talking pleated, the pleats. But these were hip stitch pleated. And what that is, it was stitched down so far, and then the pleats, And they were lined, they were wool. And I know it cost a lot to get it redone, but he said, you knew it couldn't be shorter than that. You shouldn't have had it made that short. Now, I don't know if that was a problem with the lady that made it or if, but that was the rule back then. No more than 3 inches.
Do you remember where y'all got your uniforms from?
A lady in, I think Swanee made them, but I don't remember her name. They were all homemade. You know, the skirts were homemade. And one year we had vests made, and those were, you know, made too. And then she sewed the bulldog emblem. And then we had sweaters, you know, of course, we ordered those from Raider McGahee, I think was the name of the company. Of course, we had the jackets. And I donated my jacket to the city of Sugar Hill too. But I did the uniform, and that got it. Yeah.
And do you remember any cheers?
As a matter of fact, that's the way we started. And all of us can still remember that. That's so funny. Because when we see each other out, you know, it's like, you remember this? And we all remember that. I don't know why we can remember that. I can't remember anything else, but I remember that. And I can remember I couldn't do a cartwheel. They tried their best to teach me how to do a cartwheel. I never learned to do a cartwheel. But as the front row would do the cartwheel, the back row would go into a split. Now I could lickety-split real good. And as I went down at one football game, the girl in front of me did her cartwheel. And she caught me in the chin, and I almost broke my teeth out. And we were up in Dawson County. It was cold that night. But I remember, I thought, oh, Lord, I broke my teeth. But I was okay, but I never learned to do a cartwheel. And you know, now it's gymnastics all the way. If you don't do gymnastics, you're not going to be a cheerleader. But we were just little old cheerleaders. And my daughter was my oldest daughter was a cheerleader at North Gwinnett. And the day before she went out for cheerleading, she sprung her ankle on a trampoline. She hung her foot as she went over the side, and her ankle was this big. She did her tryout, and she made cheerleading. Yeah. So, and my son played football at North Gwinnett, and he was a wrestler. And then my youngest daughter was a basketball player. She was one of the, she could shoot the prettiest three-pointer you've ever seen. Just stripped that net. I remember one night they were playing somewhere, and the announcer said, "Beth Wood lights up the lights with that three-pointer of hers." And we've got that on film. So, and that she was in 10th grade then, I think, when she made the high school team. But they were all, you know, I went to that was when Sugar Hill, Harmony, and Swanee all fed into North Gwinnett High School. So that's where I met my husband. And my very best friend for life was from there. So.
And we might have covered this in your previous interview, but how many people did you graduate with?
103.
And what year was that?
67. Mm-hmm. And we've lost about, I was not an officer, but when it comes time to do a reunion, it's like, when are we going to have a reunion? When I have time to do it, you know. So I try to keep up with everybody. And I think we've had about 30-something pass away in that time, which is, out of 103 at our age now, it's not bad. But we had a reunion. We had a 50-year reunion. And so we're not going to we'll do a 60. But we didn't do a 55. 60's coming up, though, in 2 years. I can't believe it. Cannot believe it.
Well, tell me about Stars of Tomorrow.
Stars of Tomorrow was your, I guess you'd say, antique American Idol. Of course, it was just local. It was not, you know. But we would have talent shows. You might have one at a high school in Norcross, let's say, which is not too far from here. And if you wanted to be in that talent show, you would have somebody sign you up. And I don't know how they did this. Back then you would take voice lessons, piano lessons, and your teachers would hear of a talent show and sign you up. And so I was on Stars of Tomorrow probably about 3 or 4 times. And it was televised out of Atlanta. It was a local station. The MC was his name was Freddie Miller. And at one talent show in Gainesville that we were at, I sang on the stage with Porter Wagner. Most people don't know who Porter Wagner was, but he was the guy that found, or I guess was famous with Dolly Parton. She sang with him, and he wrote a lot of her songs. But he was the MC of that talent show. But I won several, times to be, maybe didn't win, but placed. And Sarah Youngblood was my voice coach, one of my voice coaches, and Ermedine Mulder taught piano lessons. And so she was the one that really pushed for me, my piano. I took piano 3 years, and she said, "You don't like this, do you?" And I said, "No, I couldn't even play chopsticks. I hated piano. I wanted to play piano, but I couldn't do it." She said, "You just want to sing, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, let's just start singing, and I'll get sheet music, and I'll play and you sing." And I remember that was when Brenda Lee, and you don't know who Brenda Lee is, but she was an old rock and roll singer. And that was when she was famous. And she would get sheet music. You don't know what sheet music is, but instead of a book, you would go to a music store and buy a piece of sheet music. And of course, I wish I still had some of it, but I don't. But she would play and I would sing. So anyway, the three of us, Sarah Youngblood, myself, and Susan Youngblood, who was her niece, we were all on there one Sunday. And I have the article, and I believe I gave her the copy of it to put in the museum. It was saying Stars of Tomorrow, Girls from Sugar Hill or something, to appear on TV Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. But that was that was sort of like our American Idol. And my very best friend wasn't on it at the same time I was, but she won the trip. One year, Stars of Tomorrow had a talent competition, and the winner got a trip to New York, and she won it. Her name was Linda Burnett, and she won the trip to New York. And Wayne Hill's mother and her mother were best friends, and so they went with her to New York. Of course, she was in 8th grade, I think, at the time, and couldn't go by herself. But that was our American Idol back in the day.
Do you remember what years that was on air?
I don't. I would say I was in about the 8th grade, or maybe 1961, 2 or 3, something like that. Yeah.
And what channel did you say it came on?
I guess it was Channel 2. We only had 2 511, back then. And you had an antenna on top of the house. There was no streaming or no cable. And you put aluminum foil on the antenna that pulled up out of the television. You had aluminum foil to put on that to adjust it. If it didn't come in clear, you don't remember. I bet you've heard about it. Yeah.
Well, tell me about your memories, or when the first time you remember having air conditioning in your house.
Okay. My son was born in 72, and that's when we bought our first house. We had rented a house that had a little bitty air conditioner, about a 12 by 12 window unit. But as far as having air conditioning in the house, and we never had another window unit other than that one that we had at that little house. When we built our house in 84, we put air conditioning in it, and that's the first house we ever had with air conditioning. And I can remember one time when we bought that house in 72, it was so hot. There was a box fan, like you used to put in the window, but we had it sitting in the floor. And I was so hot, and I just turned sick. And I remember laying in front of that fan, and all you got was hot air because there was no cool air blowing around. But it was 84 before we had air conditioning in our house.
And you mentioned some items you donated to the museum. You also donated some weekly readers.
Weekly readers is what we got in elementary school, and what they were, it was like a newspaper, but it was for the school, and they would send us enough for the class. And she would assign each student a little section to read, and it might be an article on anything from the president to local news, something like that. But I have got a binder, and it's full, and I believe, if I'm not wrong, there's one in there where John Kennedy, it was the weekly reader where John Kennedy was assassinated. And those were back, some of them were elementary school.
And were those, do you know if they were produced like across the country, or if it was something just in Georgia?
I don't even know. We'd have to look on but I know they passed them out at school. Don't know where they came from or anything, but we had weekly, they were called weekly. We got them weekly. Weekly readers.
All right, and I've got one last question for you. You have a story about how Sycamore Road got its name?
How what?
Sycamore Road?
Well, I remember the Highway 20, or Cumming Highway as it used to be. It's now Nelson Brogdon. It's gone through 3 or 4 names. You had that, then you had Broad Street, then you had Sycamore Road. And Franklin Pass had a service station where Homespun is now. He had a station there, and he never wore shoes, even in the wintertime. He was always barefooted. You need to know about that. And he ran that store along with his brothers. They were Sammy Pass and, oh gosh, what was his other brother? Anyway, it was 3 of them. Sammy and Franklin and the other one, I can't think of his name. I'm sorry, but I can't. Anyway, they ran this. It was his store, but they worked there, and they did oil changes and so forth and all. But he never wore shoes. Franklin always was barefooted, even in the wintertime. But he was on this corner. The Mr. Lord and his family lived on this corner. On the other corner was a greenhouse on top of the hill, and I had a friend that lived in there. That was the Lawrence family. But right there in the very center of all that, where the roads crisscrossed, was a big sycamore tree. Now, when they started paving the roads that went this way, they cut the sycamore tree down. But that's where they got the name Sycamore Road, was because of that big sycamore tree.
Well, are there any other memories or stories that we have not covered that you can think of?
One thing I want to add is Sugar Hill Baptist Church, where we all went. We were all Baptist. Not everybody, but our family was all Baptist. And you had Sunday morning Sunday school, church. You also had Wednesday night prayer meeting, and then you had Sunday afternoon training union and Sunday night church. Well, they would get together on Sunday night and decide they wanted to have a social. And the social would be like a get-together party, not at the church, but elsewhere. And it was usually an ice cream social. And everybody would bring their ice cream freezers. And the main place that I remember most of them was either at Mayor and Bice's house, which was out down at Riverside where Publix is. It was down there on the hill, or Buford Dam. And at Buford Dam, right after it was completed, up on top, they've got picnic tables, cement picnic tables and all, and a covered area. And we would go up there, and they would have an ice cream social. Mayor and Bice and his wife would do peach ice cream. Sylvester Garner, who was another man, Garner Springs, he owned Garner Springs and Sugar Hill. They would do strawberry ice cream, and then everybody would do a different flavor. Mother and Daddy always did vanilla. That was our favorite. But they had the old wooden ice cream freezers, and you had to turn the crank. These were not electric freezers or battery operated. They were the turn crank. And all the kids would sit, they'd put newspapers on top of the ice cream freezer, and the kids would sit on the ice cream freezer. And I don't know what that had to do with it. It had something to do with keeping the ice from melting so quick as they turned the crank. But when the crank got slow, you knew the ice cream was ready. So instead of having parties like drinking parties and dancing parties, and these people didn't drink. You didn't drink beer. My daddy would die if he knew there was a brewery over here across from the cemetery. But that was their style of living. But the ice cream parties, the ice cream socials, were their idea of partying. And as soon as the ice cream freezer got slow, you knew the ice cream was ready. And we'd all have ice cream, and they'd sit around and talk and tell their funny stories. And that was their get-togethers, was ice cream socials.
That's perfect.
I just remembered that. I wanted to throw that in because that's important. Yeah. That's the way we celebrated when we were kids, unlike they do today. Daddy wouldn't let me dance. He wouldn't let me wear shorts. He wouldn't let me spend the night with hardly anybody except my friend Linda when I was in 8th grade, because you just didn't do that. I couldn't skate at the skating rink. I couldn't go to the drive-in, but I did. But those were some of the things that I remembered from being a child.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your memories again.
I've enjoyed it, and I just wish I could think of more. And there's so many more stories, but I just can't remember right now.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome so much.